Председатель.
Thank you so much, Madam President. The recent events in southeast Ukraine are of great concern. On April 13, having convened an emergency meeting of the Security Council, the Russian delegation called quite insistently upon a number of members of the Council to use all tools available to them to prevent the use of force in the crisis in the eastern regions of Ukraine. In response, we heard a number of ambiguous statements, and some delegations expressed their understanding for the plans of the Ukrainian authorities to use force against their fellow countrymen. Well, the result is clear. Those were as a result of the forcible coup. Usurped power in Kiev have chosen to ignore the legitimate demands of the inhabitants of the southeast and the unconstitutional use of armed force to pacify their own people, blasphemously referring to it as bandits and terrorists. Such callous steps are fraught with the risk of a real civil war in Ukraine. The first blood has already been shed. The citizens of the southeast repeatedly warn the authorities that they are ready to serve as human shields. In a number of regions, regular units of the Ukrainian army and internal forces openly objected to firing on their fellow citizens. There are cases where troops switched over to the side of the people. Is this perhaps why the self-appointed leaders in Kiev are using fighters from the right sector and other illegal armed formations on whose heels they, in essence, came to power? For example, in Kramatorsk, individuals were deployed in black uniforms, individuals belonging neither to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine nor to the internal forces. Whose command did these units heed? Of course, very few here can harbor any illusions regarding the independence of actions of Kiev. This is why the question arises. Maybe Kiev was advised to launch a scenario of force by those countries whose high-level emissaries continue to whisper in the ears of the Ukrainian leaders. A recipe for extricating oneself from this large-scale crisis which has impacted Ukraine is both simple and complex at the same time. Ukrainians must launch a dialogue, ensuring that it is comprehensive and full-fledged in nature. All without any exception, regions and political forces in the country must participate in it on an equal basis, with equal rights in resolving pressing issues. All of this must be reflected in a deeply reformed constitution, one which would be seen by the multi-ethnic Ukrainian society as a sound one, designed for the long-term, to serve as a long-term basis for a legal government. Without this, it will be very difficult for Ukraine to preserve its unity and to resolve pressing issues on extricating itself from this crisis. This topic will be the main one at the Geneva meeting, which thus far remains on the agenda. This must also be the main objective of the international community when it speaks to its concerns regarding the events in Ukraine. One must now start a real rather than a cosmetic constitutional reform. Madam President, today it is extremely important to receive confirmed information on the situation in Ukraine. If the international forces there want to be present in the country, they must objectively, in an unbiased way, assess the situation and its developments. Unfortunately, the report of the UNHCR, which was published yesterday, speaks to quite the opposite. This document, unfortunately, is biased in nature. Those who drew up the report chose not to notice that the current authorities in Ukraine became so as a result of an armed coup rather than civilized democratic elections. The attacks of illegal armed formations on the forces of law and order and the radical seizing of administrative buildings in the report are qualified as peaceful protests. Quite surprisingly, the demonstrations of the citizens of Ukraine in the eastern reaches of the country, on the other hand, are deemed to be illegal actions. In the report, it is stated that the Ukraine government allegedly intends to leave behind the unfairness of the past and to elaborate a new vision for Ukraine's future. In this, unfortunately, a number of inconvenient facts are left aside, some which point to the fact that the activity of this government from the very start is based on an atmosphere of violence and which it itself has created. There's no attention paid to a very dangerous development, the growth of aggressive nationalism and neo-fascism. The term of neo-fascism is not used